Hi guys, sorry if that last video got cut off a little bit abruptly. There were some technical difficulties, so anyways, let's proceed forward. So what we were doing right now was we were connecting our app with the Parse backend. And Parse has a bunch of data tables in its backend, and our app needs to be able to know which data table to connect to. And in order to do that, what we use are identification keys. So we'll go to Parse, and we'll take this application ID, and we'll go into our app.delegate.swift file in our parse demo project, and we'll paste in the key right there. So this first key is the app ID key. So we can find that in our keys and right here. All right. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take the client key, we're gonna copy it, and we'll pop it right in here. Awesome. So now our app will be connected with that data table in the parse backend. Okay. Um, so now that our local app is connected to the parse backend app, we need to write some code. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to click this button right here to split the screen, and we're going to open up the storyboard on the right, and we're going to make sure that login view controller is open on the left, and you can just click this button in case it's not open right now. And we'll go over and we'll find our login view controller. And now what we want to do is we want to make a referencing outlet for the items that'll be modifying, or anything that we'll basically need information from. So as you can guess, that's probably going to be the username text field. So we'll drag over, we'll control drag, and we'll make a referencing outlet, and we'll call it username text field. And now we have a referencing outlet. So we'll be able to access whatever text the user puts in here. Awesome. And once the users put in text, they'll click the login button, and we want some login code to execute. So for this, we'll make an action outlet. So we'll control drag right over here, and we'll set this to action, and the action outlet's name will be login user. Awesome. So this action outlet is basically a function that's called when the login button is clicked. And over inside here, we're going to write the login code. And the cool thing about parse is that it gives you a lot of documentation. So there's a lot of code that you don't actually even need to write. You can just go and copy. And really, you just need to know where to look for it. So we'll go to Google, we'll type in parse iOS developer, and this first link that we get right here, iOS developers guide, we'll go to that, and it gives us all of this documentation for parse. So we are going to be concerned with logging in the user. So we'll click on users right here, and we'll click on logging in. We'll click on Swift, and we'll copy this code, and we'll pop it right in this function right here, login user. Awesome. So this does not account for a password. Our password is always just going to be my pass, because again, we didn't have a password text field over here. But what's our username going to be? It's going to be the text that the user enters into the username text field. So over here, we're going to replace the string with username text field dot text. Awesome. And okay, it's giving us a quick fix error, so we'll just tap here, double tap. Awesome. Okay. So this code will basically log in the user. All right. So once the user is logged in, where do we want to take them? We want to take them to a second view controller that we haven't made yet. That'll be the view controller where we display all of the post images. So before we get there, why don't we go ahead and test this code? And in order to test the code, the first thing that we need to do is we'll go into our parse backend, and we'll go and press core. And since we haven't created a user authentication system that has a registration system, we haven't actually made any user objects. There's no users in the database. So if we want to test as a user and we want to check if the user can log in, we are going to have to add a user in. So we're going to do plus row, and a row will appear. We'll double click and we'll type our name. So I'll type my name, and you guys can type your names, and we'll set the password to mypass. Okay, so now we have this row created. We have a user in our database. So now we can test this app, and I'll do it on an iPhone 5s simulator, and we can see if we log in. So in this tutorial, I won't really be showing you how to create a user registration system, just because that takes a lot of time and it doesn't really correspond with what we're trying to learn at this point. So we'll wait for the app to load. Once it does, I'm going to type in my name and I'll click login. And once I click login and we go back into parse, we'll see that right now there's not really a way that we can tell whether the user logged in. That's because we haven't been redirected to a new screen if that really does happen. So here's what we can do. We can say if the user login is nil, if the user is not equal to nil, meaning the user has logged in, right in here, we'll print to the console to make sure that we know that we've logged in. We can just say logged in. And let's make sure that our console is showing, so we'll click this button right here. And now let's try running the app again. Alright, so right here we'll type in our name and we'll click login and it says logged in. Alright, wonderful. So that means we're being able to log into our parse backend. Alright, so we just learned how to log in a user. Now let's work on being able to upload an image. And once we've done both of those, then we'll figure out how to display all the images in the database. So in order to do that, the first thing that we need to do is we'll switch over to our post image view controller right here. And in our post image view controller, we need to make sure that it's connected. So we did connect it earlier, so right now it's this view controller right here is connected with this post image view controller.swift file. So now we need to make some referencing outlets. So let's make a referencing outlet for our image view, because that's going to be changing. We're going to be changing its image. So we'll just call this referencing outlet an image view. Okay, so that's connected. Now we want to make action outlets for these select image and post image buttons. So we'll control drag again down here, and we'll make sure this is an action outlet, and we'll call it select image. Okay, so right in here we can pop in whatever code that we need for selecting an image, and let's also create the action outlet right now. So right below, let's create an action outlet for post image, and we'll call this post image. Awesome. So now we have these two functions, and when the select image button is clicked, this code will be called whatever code is inside this function, and when post image is clicked, this code will be executed, whatever code we put here. Alright, so let's put in that code. And this code, honestly, it's just some syntax that you need to know. So I'm going to give it to you. I'm just going to copy and paste it in here, and I have it prepared right here. So the first piece of code that we need to copy in is this. And you can pause the video and you can write it down, or I mean you can type it out yourself, but I'm going to copy it in here. And this is a function that we're going to place right below the post image action outlet, and we don't need this line right here, so we can get rid of that, and we can change this line to image view.image. So I'll explain what all of this is doing in just a minute. So the next piece of code that we want to copy is this code right here. So you can go ahead and type in that code after I pop it in right here. So let me explain what all this is doing. So when the user clicks select image button, this will open a UI image picker controller, and that's basically a screen on your phone that says, hey, okay, now the user can go and select their image, and then it'll let you basically select an image from your photo library, and it'll present this view controller. It'll present a screen where you can choose that image, and it'll call this function right here, and once the user has selected an image, it'll bring you back to the current screen, and it'll set the image view that you have. It'll set the image view's image to the image that the user just picked. So it's giving us an error right here where I'm setting the delegate of the image to self. So don't worry about this too much, because this is supposed to be a tutorial designed for beginners, and you may not entirely understand the concept of delegates. But basically what you need to do is right up here, you want to add in UI image, pick your controller delegate, and you want to add in UI navigation controller delegate, and then the error should go away. Okay, so it does. So now this will let you pick an image, and then it'll display an image here. But what's the last part that we want to do? We want to take that image and we want to put it in our parse database. So in order to do that, let's go write some code and post image. And we'll say var image object equals pf object, and we'll choose this constructor right here. And the class name is going to be the data table from our database that we're inputting all of this into. So that data table is going to be images right here. So we want to spell it exactly like that. So we'll put it in as a string right here, and we're going to say the class name is images. Alright, so now we need to customize the image object. First thing that we need to do is we want to set who the image object is created by. So image object of username is equal to. So we want to be able to get the username of the current person that's logged in. So in order to do that, all we need to do is we say pf user dot current user dot username. And if you're not familiar with this, this is just a bunch of syntax. So once you get familiarity with this, it'll be pretty simple. Next thing that we want to do is we want to set the image of the image object. And in order to do that, we'll look up the field and how we named it. So we just call this image in our database. So we'll type in image right here, and then we will say image object of image equals. We basically want to put a PF file here because that's the data type in which Swift, in which parse lets you store a UI image. So in order to construct a PF file, we just use a PF file constructor, which is built in. And if you don't understand all this, don't worry too much, because a lot of this is just new syntax. This is something that really just comes with practice. So PF file, and now we want to specify the data. In order to get the data, here's what we can do. We can use UI JPEG, and it should appear right here. One second. So UI JPEG image. Alright, so we're having some issues with autofill. I want to make sure this autofill is UI image JPEG representation right there. Okay, and the image that we're going to want is, it's going to be our image views image. So over here, down here, we're setting the image view dot image equal to image, whatever image the user selected. So over here, the image that we're going to use is image view dot image. And the compression quality, we're going to compress it by 0.5 just so the file isn't too large to store in the database. Okay. And now it's giving us a quick fix, so we'll quick fix that. Awesome. And it's giving us another one. Sure, why not? Okay, so now we have all this code that should basically let you post an image to the database, and it'll appear right there. But in order to test this, one thing that we need to do is we need to connect these two view controllers. And the way we connect them is using a segue. So let's go to our storyboard, and let's make a segue between these two view controllers. And here's how we'll do it. So we'll click on the login view controller and this yellow button right here, and then we'll control drag. So hold the control button and drag to this view controller, and it'll appear right here, this window, and we'll click show. That's the type of segue we want. Then this connection will appear between these two view controllers. Now let's click this segue, and let's click this button right here and give it an identifier. And we'll call this toPostImage VC. So toPostImage view controller, and we'll copy that because we're going to be using it in just a second. So now let's go to login view controller.swift, and over here, once the user is logged in and we printed it, we want to perform that segue and take them to that next screen right there. So in order to do that, all we have to do is self.perform segue with identifier, and that identifier will just be the identifier we just gave it in the storyboard, and we're going to say the sender is self because we're going from this current view controller to the next. Okay, so now what we can do is we can test our app. So let's run it on a simulator, and I'm going to type in my username, and I'm going to click login. So now I'm on the next view controller. Cool. So I'll click on select image, and this will show me some of the inbuilt images in the iOS simulator, and I'll just click one of them, and cool, it's displaying right up here. And next I'll click post image. Alright, so we haven't really added any print statements. We don't really know if it worked unless we check our database. So we'll refresh our database a little bit, and we'll see it's not really showing up here. So let's click that another time, and no, it's not working. And why isn't it working? You know, that's a little troublesome, but there's a good reason for that. So let's go back, and let's go to our post image view controller, and we'll notice we created this image object, but this image object is all local until we put it up in our database. So how do we do that? All we need to do is we need to say image object dot save, and we'll do save in background with target in this case, and the parameters will just be nil and nil. And what this will do is we've created basically a row, a record for our data table right here, and then when we do save in background with target, that'll basically tell parse to go and put it in our data table in the backend. So now let's give this a try. So I'll type in my username, and I'll click login, and I'll select an image, and I'll select a different one this time. I'm feeling like a waterfall, so I'll click the waterfall, and then I'll click post image, and I'll see that, yeah, the simulator is doing some work, so maybe it's saved. Let's go and check. So we need to refresh the page, and let's refresh it one more time. Awesome. So now we'll see that, you know, it's showing up in a different table called image here. And the reason for that is we did something wrong. We set the class name here to image instead of images, and it should be images. So the reason we did that was that so we understand that when we have this sort of an error, what we can do. And here's what we can do. We can go back into our data table, and over here in image we can say we don't want this data table anymore. We accidentally created it because we typed in something wrong into our code. So all we need to do is we need to go to more, and we need to say drop class, and that'll delete this data table. And we'll just confirm it by writing in the image. We'll just write in image, which was the name of the data table. Now we'll go back, and now that we fixed this, we'll try running it again. So what does this tell you? This tells you that you need to make sure that whatever values you put in, whether it's class name right here or it's a field, this needs to align with the values that you have in your data table, with the column names, with the class names, and it needs to align, and it's case sensitive, so you want to pay a lot of attention to that. Alright, let's give this another try. They say third time's the charm, so let's see. I'll pick a different image this time, and I'll click post image, and now let's go into our data table in our backend, and I'll click refresh, and we'll see the images data table now has an object, and if we click on that image, we'll see we can download the image and open it up, and it's the image that we put up there. Awesome. So now we can store entries into our database, and we can log in the user. So what's the last step of all this? The last step is really creating a table view and displaying all the images to the current user. So we've completed 2/3 of the app, and with that I'll end this part of this video tutorial series, and you can join me in the next video to create the last part of this application.